So while coding is a large part of developing a DAO, before you can even get to the code, you need to know exactly and narrowly what you want the code to do for your use case. Is decentralization right for your organization? Is a blockchain the right trust mechanism for your organization? Is the internet a decent platform for what you're doing? Because that is a large part of what DAOs in this current understanding are. If any one of those things doesn't directly appeal to your use case, maybe forming an LLC and using some of the tooling would be better for your use case. But if you want all those things, then DAOs are definitely the way to go.
Our vision is to accelerate the build out of solar, wind, and batteries by 2030. And so we want to build this platform where people can sign up and submit their kilowatt hours per month, and then they'll be received tokens for every kilowatt hour. And then it gets into what Christopher knows.
A big question I have, actually, there's two questions from that summary that I have. The first is a consumer perspective question. What do these tokens get me? And then the other is, what does accelerate by 2030 mean?
Okay.
Like, do you have solid numbers or goals or a definition more than more solar as an energy mix? Because that's going as a trend for sure. But like, how do you want to accelerate?
Okay. He's saying that what we'll do is we'll use these tokens to accelerate people paying down their system. And he's got all kinds of ideas how it works. Right now, you can buy a system cheaper than you can pay for electricity from the utility company, but you end up owing for the system for a certain amount of years, and that's why it's cheap. The idea is you want to get out from underneath that debt as soon as possible, so that now you're a true energy producer.
What I'm hearing is that these tokens will help me pay down the system that you guys install faster, so I don't have to pay US dollars for this. It's a way of shortening the financing for people.
There will be fiat involved.
I can tell you probably what he's thinking with it. You guys will pass the direct costs on with fiat for the labor and installation, and any profit you normally would be charging in fiat, you'll be claiming in tokens, and then those tokens will have additional value because of the money demand of people using it to purchase electricity from your chartered member. I can definitely see the value add, but on a grid scale, like, it's a very hard sell in America for something like this. Sure, this is something that would be extremely useful in rural communities. Even unbanked communities in America would benefit, definitely. But it's just that there's more traction to be had outside of developed grid. So if you aren't going to really find traction inside city centers for something like this, because they're already part of the electric company. You're going to have to be part of a much larger network before you can target that market. Reality of a DAO. So like, you mean the day-to-day life, or how does one like become a DAO? The main use case for decentralization is power dynamics. If you want to move as fast as possible, a better dynamic is what's called open source. You will be releasing all of your stuff publicly and inviting the public to work on your project alongside you. A lot of very good projects are open source and they develop at a great pace because of it. But that's not inherent to blockchain. That's a philosophical decision of product development. The decentralization is more useful for when there are large institutions that specifically are trying to shut down the traditional method. So like, if there's a electric company in a region you want to expand in and they currently have it lobbied, co-op energy farms can't start. A DAO could technically circumvent that and provide the value of solar through the existing legal institutions, but with a new payment structure that circumvents that power. That's really like the core for decentralization, is a way to rid a technocratic and oligarchic institution of its power dynamic over its consumer. Point that people are actively finding better alternatives. Right now, it's eccentrics and those in wealth. But when it's an economic decision, it's purely the cheaper alternative. That's when you start seeing scaling change. That we've covered decentralization, autonomy in code, and there is only one last part of the DAO, which is the organization. As its decentralized structure implies, it is a very horizontal organization, meaning that people generally have domain authority or are at least equally weighted in discussions on the DAO's movements. It's a very highly democratic style, similar to discos. Think like dislocated cooperative. Basically another way of doing an internet company, but they are very open, transparent, and democratic in their organizational philosophy as well. That's one of the other main considerations for your workflow. And I know you want to stay on your DAO as an example, but it's easier for me to describe the issues with MADAO now. Our economist is wanting a more authoritarian structure for the monetary system, where it is not voted upon by the group, but rather dictated by harsher numbers that are, I believe, defined by algorithms that would be voted on by the group. But we have not gotten there. Eddie has not provided that nuance to me, but I do feel that that's what he's meaning, is he wants to have a independent institution like the Fed compared to the US Congress, which is a much more political organization. And that's where hierarchy comes in, because a vertical hierarchy, like the United States Congress, has the president at top and then the vice president below him. So like there's a clear line of authority, the buck stops at the top kind of stuff. But in a DAO with a more horizontal structure and less defined hierarchy, that can be challenging to know whose authority you will defer to in a conflict. And that's why we have had such vibrant discussions, because we want to come to a proper solution and not just follow what any one person says. It is a question to be had for what you're doing. Because if you're just like needing to run an Etsy shop, for like 20 or 30 people that you have that are already buying from you, you don't need a DAO, even if you have like 3 or 4 other people that are contributing a lot. You can just have a small company. For your use case, getting people to 1, have solar installed, 2, share that power with their neighbors, and 3, collect revenues from the power that they generate in excess and is shared. Those 3 things are very difficult trust exercises, which is where the technology of blockchain can be useful. If contracts and law and politics are not enough, you can go down to code and enforce it by machine. And that's a lot of a DAO's appeal. People can just sign up and stuff works. Kind of like how we experience apps today, but in a more core fashion. Apps today are always an appendage of a company. It's not even Twitter. The Twitter company is a company of people who produces an app. It's not a internet resource of these people. I would argue that MUI, Material UI, CSS framework, which is an open source project, is more of a DAO than Twitter is, simply because of their structure and the way that they operate. But neither of them use blockchain because it's not explicitly what MUI is. It's still a company of people, not a technology of company. It's hard to find the words to appropriate. It is a convergence of the technology and the people within it. Kind of like how our culture and how being part of a government office delineates domain authority. DAOs have very similar attributes. That's why I said at the beginning, personality is a lot of it anyway, because you will have domain experts that will weigh in on important subjects of the DAO's functioning. And that's important. People should study, research, and learn something worth being taken seriously for. I'm quite excited to see what Eddie comes with. Also partially thinking of a solution while he's going through this data that could bring us back into alignment with his understandings of supply and demand within our use case, which is something else that you'll have to manage, especially as you'll be liquidating tokens onto the open market. That's the main way that you'll incentivize people to actually collect these tokens, is that they can, even if the value gradually depreciates because more energy is being produced than used, it's still some money for nothing. So people will always cash out that liquidity if they can. It's the exact balance I'm trying to talk about. You're going to need to appropriately keep the token liquidated so that there's money behind the token for people to exchange with. And you're going to have to manage accruing new membership, especially paying membership that will go out and buy these tokens on the open market and aid you in putting liquidity in it. Specifically, these are people that are around the systems you're installing. They are not the people that you're installing the systems for. You would need to also think of like an affiliate marketing solution to convince the people you're installing these systems for to actively market the business model itself to their neighbors, that they can pay for this token, which is cheaper than their electricity, to get solar. There's a lot of steps there. So clean, easy, well-defined graphics will help a lot, making it easier for people to join. Maybe even like yard posters, like signs that you stick in the ground, you know? I would say like the most difficult question for your use case is, how well do you think you can balance the economics of installing systems, managing a company for that, and managing the marketing to keep the liquidity stable, or at least stable enough for people to think casually about it as a good deal. I think that might be it for today. We did cover DAOs pretty thoroughly. There's just as with every video that we've made so far, everything I talk about has much, much deeper research to go into. And I highly encourage you to do horizontal research, which is opening multiple web tabs to find different sources and see what they talk about in the same context. So like two solar companies talking about the technology would be horizontal research. So you can clearly understand from multiple perspectives what's being talked about. And that goes for the code, the HTML, CSS, the developer workflow, researching libraries, researching the legal and business complications with DAOs right now. It's extremely interesting stuff, especially if you are looking to build one.